where we left off. So, if the living system is designed to last for billions of years, and the purpose is to maintain a library of information, which I think we've just established that it's doing, who is it for? That should scare the hell out of you. Who? There are only two possibilities for client end user of this system. A direct user. The living system on Earth exists for a utilitarian purpose. The designer expected it to be used. He put it here for his buddies to find, to use, or for him to use himself. An indirect user. The message might be to any intelligent members of any species that manages to evolve sufficiently to be able to read the code. Well, that's the systems analysis of it. I mean, we can choose to believe because of our pre-programmed, way of thinking about things, we're so special. It's for us, and if we can just figure out how to read it, we can all ascend to the, whatever, turn to angels and play harps. Or we can get really dark and gloomy about it and think about, that we're just food and resources and a map. A really handy one too. Any extraterrestrial could land any day or any time. Pick any one of us up, and he's got his map, he's got his food source. The information in the DNA can include such things as a general map of the cosmic neighborhood, availability of nutritional resources, availability of useful natural resources. I don't think that one holds up because the planet changes so much over time. It could list what's available, but it couldn't necessarily say what it was. The efficiency of having a living system serving as a database is that it's available all over the planet. Now, as you know, Cascadians have told us that we are food and resources for hyperdimensional beings. That's not a pleasant thought, is it? Does everybody in here know that? That they have said that? It's a pretty creepy thing, huh? And yet, an analysis of history and an analysis, a systems analysis of the living system tend to support that. So what do we do with that? I'm sorry, I don't want to be lunch. So it seems obvious that the only kind of designer who can manage to overcome all of the difficulties of designing a biological system of life and who is able to see the planet with billions of prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells 3.8 billion years ago, because it would have needed both. One to be the evolving system and the other to be food and producing the oxygen environment. And it would have been billions of them. You couldn't have just started with one organism. Okay. Would be an intelligence that is not constrained by space and time. No ordinary ET civilization will do, because if we consider such, we are faced with the same problem of who created life on their planet. The question of the source of an intelligence that chronologically must precede human intelligence or the living system intelligence, since we're just, latecomers to this game, is a complex and controversial issue. One must postulate the existence of a primary universal intelligence that would both precede and could give rise to the source intelligence responsible for the design of the living system. And that is exactly what the Cascadians talk about. They talk about the existence of different levels of intelligence and beings at different densities. The fact remains that from our limited temporal perspective, the universe indeed defies our common sense. It's not the theories of reality that are weird. What is abundantly clear is that it is the reality itself that is weird. Despite the compelling evidence of the design of the living system, why would it be necessary to assume that the intelligence that gave rise to life on our planet would have to have had the form and function of our kind of biological life? It seems obvious that it would only be a higher kind of life that would have the faculties and the capabilities of doing so. That is, there should be no imperative in our search to constrain the designer to a biological entity. The logical definition necessary for a designer of anything is that it has the necessary intelligence and skills to accomplish the task. Is there something special about biology, such that our kind of intelligence can only exist within its wetware format? There exists a primal core intelligence in our universe, ultimately responsible for the design of any systems that in the universe, including biological life. Oh, I got some pictures here. Oh yeah, the designer. Like that. The body of evidence within the system itself may be the only tangible evidence of the existence of the designer that we may ever have occasion to experience. The designer may be logically unknowable, but not so the evidence. And this is kind of where I have come to with the Cassiopean experiment. They have given me clues to follow these things. I even wonder sometimes if I'm not reading my own DNA. We're not going to talk about mass extinction right now, but consider the existence of the living system designer intelligence within the same context. An intelligent entity capable of implementing a genetically engineered biological life form, placing it on a suitable planet within our galaxy, that all we need to consider because of the attainable proof of design must exist within the design itself. And that evidence of design is all we need to validate, to know the origin of life on our planet. So I think that we know there's a designer. I would say that the ultimate designer cannot possibly be, or the ultimate, or the ultimate intelligence in the universe, the source of information, certainly is balanced. And we just may be, particularly plagued at the present moment by creatures that seek to use us as their own personal information library, because the truth is that the answer can be both. It can be that the information was put in for us to read, for our benefit, at some point when we got able to read it and we acquired the skills necessary, and somebody else came along and co-opted it for their own use. I like that solution better, because it's like I can say yes to both, because it leaves it open. Because can we figure out how to use it, what to do with it? And I think we can. And a lot of the clues are in this little book that I'm talking about, this fifth option, because like I said, his discussion of how DNA changes and mutates is just really, really excellent. Even if he's an engineer, he did his homework. So we're going to come back and talk about these mass extinction events. I think, I don't know, we may not even... Yeah, we'll talk about the mass extinction events a little bit. They're not all that important, because I think everybody here knows about the big 5 mass extinction events, yes? We've got, no? Did I hear those? You want me to talk about them?
Yes.
Blood and gore and guts and stuff? All right, then we'll take our assigned break. I think we have a break coming, right? Yes? Mariah? Do we have a break? Okay, we're supposed to have a break. All right, is everybody still with us here, or is anybody getting tired? I think we're going to do something here when we come back from the break that's going to perk everybody right up. A couple of people have said they just want me to talk about the Cassiopean experiment. Do you want me to just stop where I am and not finish this topic? No. Well, you see, the thing is that what I'm talking about here is basically the things that I've been compelled to learn by virtue of what the Cassiopeans have told me or not told me on those many occasions when they say, discover, find out, up to you, or no dice, baby. Very often I will ask questions and they will refuse to answer and tell me that it's up to me to use my brain, which, as they say, is my God-given resource, to find out what's going on my own, do some research. And sometimes they give me little clues, little hints. Most of the stuff I've been talking about here today is really, it's an expanded scientific version of things that they've told me. But of course, if I just tell people what the seas say, and don't back it up with anything, then, I'm a cult guru. So, this is just to let you know that there's a lot more of what's going on than just what the Cassiopeans say. And I also want to demonstrate what I teach, which is, always do your own research, do your own thing. Just because the seas tell me something doesn't mean that I'm going to believe it. I'm going to research it. So, okay, I researched it, and I found out that a whole heck of a lot of things that they've said are true, and you've just been the beneficiary of that particular information, that particular line of information. But I am going to get a little more into the seas as we go along here. But let me just finish up with our extinctions. Now, I'm not supposed to talk about extinctions. If you talk about comets or cometary impacts, it doesn't matter to Victor Klube or whoever, it's cult-like discussion. Which is interesting because Victor Klube, who's a retired astronomer, he lives in the north of France. I think I better send him a warning letter. Has talked about, a giant comet that must have come into our solar system many, many thousands of years ago and was in a fairly close orbit within the system and broke up while it was in the system. And this breaking up of this comet gave rise to many of the ancient legends about gods in the sky and battles between gods and so on and so forth. And then after it had numerous impacts or numerous events of cataclysmic cleansing, after which it became more or less a stream of particles that just rotates through the solar system and delivers a few bombardments every now and then. And at that point in time, since there were all these legends of gods fighting in the sky, but there was no longer any physical evidence of it in the sky, then people began to formulate religions about, divine beings in the sky and their goings on and their doings and so forth, and religions were derived from that. So he covers that pretty extensively in his books, The Cosmic Serpent and The Cosmic Winter. They're really hard to get. It's funny, all the really good, interesting books that tell you a lot of good things are really hard to get. The publisher buys the copyright, publishes a limited number of copies, and then it goes out of print, and then if you want a copy, you have to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars for it. Kluge's book is a case in point. Also John Keel. John Keel, if anybody has read John Keel, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about, when he talks about the comparison between the UFO phenomenon, channeling phenomenon, and the paranormal, because it seems that this whole channeling related to UFO thing is, goes way back. It's just people forget. They don't think about those things. Now, the Cassiopeans have said that we are due for another cleansing in the not too distant future, but they won't say when, and we of course can't exactly pin it down. So I'm going to say something totally illegal here. It may not be illegal in Spain, but it is in France. my guess is it's probably pretty soon, based on the frequency of fireballs and meteorites that we've been experiencing on this Earth. Also, the pronounced changes in the atmosphere, which are undoubtedly a result of the Earth moving into an area of space flooded with comet dust. Not to mention the possibility of the approach of a companion star, which can change the whole electrical flow between the sun and all the planets in the solar system, which can give rise to a lot of the phenomena that we've been experiencing for the past 14 or 15 years with greater and greater intensity. It can also cause internal heating of the Earth, which then causes more volcanic eruptions. And if you think about the fact that 75% of the Earth is underwater, what you see in volcanic activity above the water, which has increased considerably and dramatically in the past 10 years. Imagine that there is three or four times that much more happening under the sea that we're not aware of. In fact, they've recently talked about the fact that there are new volcanic vents and evidence of volcanic eruptions undersea. In fact, one is going on right at the moment, right off the Canary Islands. So that heating of the water in our oceans by virtue of the inner heating of the Earth, by virtue of the electrical interaction between our sun and the companion star, can cause increased evaporation. That, combined with cooling of our upper atmosphere, which would be brought about by the Earth encountering an area of more cosmic dust, which would be commensurate or kind of concomitant with increase in fireball activity, because if you're in a stream of dust, there's obviously some bigger objects in it, and you're going to have an increase of fireball and meteorite. I mean, come on. 5-10 years ago, if a meteorite landed anywhere and did anything, they would have said, this is a once-in-a-century event. And they did. They used to say it never happens. I mean, I've actually got a textbook that says, that meteorites or cometary things, they never impact the Earth. It never happens. So now that it's happening almost every month, it's getting a little spooky out there. Does everybody agree it's getting a little spooky out there with all the stuff that's going on? Okay, so we're very likely faced with some fairly interesting activity upcoming, but I'm not a scaremonger. I think that it's a very good idea to be prepared for anything. I was brought up in Florida where we had hurricanes, and I was always taught that you always keep, you have a hurricane supplies closet all the time. And periodically you remove the stuff from it, use it, eat it, and replace it so that it's always fresh and in good condition. So, you prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and you take what comes. It's kind of my attitude. So just because I think that things are going to get a little squirrely out there on the planet in the next couple of years, and I think it's going to be the next couple of years. What am I talking about? It's already happening. I mean, the last few winters have been absolutely outrageous. Look at the floods, the rains, the tsunamis, the earthquakes, the volcanoes. I mean, it's like every week. And of course, it almost inspires one to go a little biblical, and start quoting Matthew 24 or Revelation or something, but, who needs that? So, talking about extinctions, when we consider the fact that we have this living system on our planet that covers it like a mold on cheese, it's just like everywhere, it's a pretty significant thing when we consider that an estimated 2 billion species have evolved in the past 600 million years. For the first 2 or 3 billion years of life on Earth, there were only microorganisms on the planet, terraforming. 99.9% of the species that have ever lived are now extinct. Remember our little graph we were looking at. Between 1/4 to 1/2 of those species existing today will become extinct within the next 30 years. And that's without any cataclysms. No species, however successful, lasts forever. The most important thing we can thus see about the living system is its ability to create new forms and survive. It has survived 5 known great extinctions and an innumerable number of lesser ones. I've got a paper, a scientific paper at home, talking about some mutations that occurred as a result of the Tunguska explosion. And in particular, the blood type of a woman or her mother, I think one way or the other, but anyhow, the blood type was changed in a way that cannot happen naturally or except by a mutation. And the mother was only in a position to see the explosion. She was, the flash of light. And the idea that a flash of light, which of course may carry some kind of radiation or something, especially that particular kind, could change DNA, suggests that there's all kinds of DNA changes that could be occurring to individuals on the Earth during any type of cataclysmic or cometary bombardment activity. As I said, according to Schiller's analysis, there are an awful lot of minor mutations that take place in our DNA all the time, and he kind of maps how they happen and the ways they happen. And they can be there and have no apparent effect whatsoever. I mean, change nothing at all, visibly in any way, until there is one significant externally induced mutation that then brings everything into play like a cascade. So the question is, and we think about this, we think about, what kind of, what is survival, what is mutation, and we think about our distribution curve. Everybody in this room is part of a distribution curve. Okay, when things start happening, maybe all of you are the ones out of the distribution curves of your community that will have the right DNA to be in a position that when, the fallout is over and done with, you're the one still standing. You see what I'm saying? Because if evolution anticipates changes, then certainly there are people in environments who are possibly aware. And then we talked about consciousness as having been a development, a feedback mechanism for helping to increase the survival rate of the living system on the planet. So what if the development of higher abilities, or not necessarily develop, but the ability to read the DNA, the ability to use the DNA to connect to the information system that is outside our system, the universal mind, is the thing that makes you fit to be one of those individuals whose DNA transforms, or who is in the right place on the distribution curve when things fall out. Do you understand what I mean? Okay. In addition to the big 5, which were all, according to mainstream science, those are the ones they really acknowledge, and then they mention, numerous frequent other ones, blah, blah, blah. But then they don't really talk about them. The Holocene extinction, also known as the Pleistocene Holocene event. And that was 12,000 years ago, round figure, 10,500 BC, 12,500 years ago, however you want to name it. And that was written about by physicists Richard Firestone, Alan West, and Simon Warwick Smith. Alan West has recently come under some fairly severe attack, and we don't wonder why. But I want does everybody know that we started publishing the Dot Connector magazine? The guy who was doing it his health failed and he couldn't afford to do it. Anyhow, we do this magazine, so y'all can get this if you want. Just go to the Dot Connector website. Anyhow, Richard Firestone writes in the Cycle of Cosmic Catastrophes. When people use the term extinction, they mean that many living species vanished. This is just part of the equation, however. Another side is that some species survived, and survived in a changed form. In all past With ecosystems out of balance, many of the surviving species experienced explosive growth. This is what happened 13,000 years ago, when an unusual mix of conditions created favorable conditions for the human species. And remember, the living system likes to have a whole lot of any species in a whole lot of places and habitats and adapted to a whole lot of situations, because the living system knows there's going to be cataclysms and it wants to make sure that some of them survive. First, there were new genes, spurred by genetic mutations that produced a burst of creativity and technological resourcefulness. Humans became even more efficient predators. The event also killed off many competing predators, and skilled hunters may have decimated many surviving ones, ensuring that more people survived. The same resourcefulness made humans better at finding food in every way, and consequently human populations expanded rapidly. Secondly, a benign climate due partly to the greenhouse effect of the impacts fostered larger human populations. The warmer climate, coupled with humans' newfound resourcefulness, fostered the invention of agriculture, freeing humans from a nomadic lifestyle. I also suggest in this article that I've written here, this is probably one of my most comprehensive pieces on the topic, that it was this particular event that also created genetic mutations that we currently know as psychopathy, our own species predator. Third, increasing populations led more people to live together in villages and towns where the division of labor allowed a larger pool of skilled talent to develop. This fueled an almost constant technological boom in many fields, producing, among other things, pottery, metalworking, writing. All that may seem positive, except that the burgeoning population, initially fostered by the extinction event, contains the seeds of many of our current troubles. When overpopulation occurs in any species, whether it is rabbits, locusts, lemmings, or people, a host of problems comes along with it, including epidemics, starvation, extreme aggression, ecosystem destruction, and scarce resources. Those are all the problems we are facing today, every single one of them. Epidemics, starvation, extreme aggression, ecosystem destruction, and scarce resources. An extinction sequence comprises the following stages. A major catastrophe leads to the disappearance of some species. These disappearances lead to the overpopulation of some surviving species. Overpopulation leads to devastating depopulation. This equation has held true for every past extinction event. In the current sequence, we have passed through the first two stages as a species, but not the last, depopulation. So that's just talking about an extinction event. So we are supposedly in the 6th grade extinction. That means, in broad terms, the Holocene extinction includes the disappearance of large mammals, and these disappearances have normally been considered as either a result of climate change, a result of the proliferation of modern humans, or both. However, in 2007, the cometary impact hypothesis was presented, but has not yet been broadly accepted in the scientific community because they don't like to accept these things. These extinctions occurring near the Pleistocene-Holocene boundary are sometimes referred to as the Quaternary extinction event, or the Ice Age extinction. However, the Holocene extinction may be regarded as continuing into the 21st century. According to Michael Sewell, who writes about it, soon a millennium will end. With it will pass 4 billion years of evolutionary exuberance. Yes, some species will survive, particularly the smaller, tenacious ones living in places far too dry and cold for us to farm or graze. Yet we must face the fact that the Cenozoic, the age of mammals, which has been in retreat since catastrophic extinctions of the late Pleistocene, is over, and that the Anthropozoic or Catastrophozoic has begun. His point of view is that human beings themselves are causing this extinction event. Well, we can clearly see that if we don't get a big cleansing from the universe, that is what's going to happen. I mean, reasonably speaking. Does anybody here think that there is not something seriously going wrong with the economic system on the entire planet? I mean, country after country after. And what they expect to do is to turn everybody into slaves. So, anyway, we don't need any more about this human caused extinction because we all, whether or not there are any cometary bombardments, and when I say that, usually comets don't hit the planet, they just explode in the upper atmosphere, which is why there's not a whole long geological record of cometary bombardments, because when something explodes, I mean, just look at Tunguska. Nothing actually hit the planet. It exploded in the air, left a depression, and it left multiple little oblong bays, just like you find 50 to 100,000 of along the east coast of the United States that are dated to this Holocene-Pleistocene extinction event. That means that there were thousands upon thousands of small pieces of comet exploding in the upper atmosphere and basically effacing anything that was on the ground from the face of the earth. I mean, just think about it, okay? So, the crisis we are facing, and we are facing a crisis, whether it's a cosmic crisis or not, can only be met by a new type of human being. And I'm not promising you some kind of mantra or some kind of, exercise where you wave your hands over a sheet of paper with symbols on it, because the kind of human being that you need to be prepared for an event of this kind is something altogether different. It's somebody who is physically, psychologically, and emotionally prepared to deal with whatever comes, in the event that it comes, or in the event that it doesn't come, or if it's near you or far from you, or whatever. And that means you have to avoid those things that are being put into our environment to cause our extinction. Psychopaths run the agricultural industry, they run the pharmaceutical industry. After long research and asking Cassie many questions, we have determined that a lot of this is, even if they aren't consciously aware of it, it's being done to destroy our health. Ivan Pavlov did some studies on a bunch of dogs, and he also did studies on human beings that are less well known. And there's a thing called transmarginal inhibition. And he discovered that there were 4 different temperaments of dogs. And when you're trying to break a dog down, you program and then you try to break the programming and reprogram it. So there are 4 different kinds of temperaments, and they found that there was one particular temperament that the only way such a dog could be broken, that is, break its will, break it down, break its mind, break it in pieces internally, would be if it was physically ill or had recently had a surgical operation performed on it. That for some reason, physical illness or having had surgery done pretty much put the dog in a position of having no free will. And the dog not having any will of its own was easily broken and destroyed, and some of them, and they've done this to human beings. There have been all kinds of programmings and mind control experiments, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with those things. So the thing is to get into the state of health where they cannot control you. There's also some indications in the Cassian material that eating certain substances make you more susceptible to mind control frequencies that are beamed out through the airwaves, you know, along with radio waves and TV waves and microwaves and so forth. A lot of it can come by microwave. So what you eat and your state of health is extremely important. And there are other things that have to be done because there's something that the seas call the wave. The wave is supposed to arrive at some point in the not too distant future. At the time we started talking about it, or they first announced it, it was what, 17, 18 years ago? And, you know, in some of the cryptic ways they put things, you know, we're not entirely sure what it is. I asked them once and they said it was hyperkinetic sensate. Well, that means like emotional overload. And anybody can go into an emotional overload if something shocking or untoward happens on their planet or in front of them. I mean, let's face it, we're all basically right now in psychological and emotional overload because of the events happening on our planet. Look what happened on 9/11. And look at all the people that are dying all over the planet today. I mean, not just from starvation, but from, you know, war. So we're already becoming emotional. I mean, the very fact that all of you are here, you know, is kind of an indication that you emotionally know that something is going on. And, you know, you're among those people who are looking for answers. You're seeking. So, the thing is that being prepared involves a lot of things. It's not just, there are no easy answers. You can't just sit there and visualize a spinning tetrahedron. You can't just, you know, wave your hands over things or put a purple plate under your dinner plate. You can't chant a mantra. You can't retire from the world into a monastery and purify yourself. You know, you have to become an optimized human being, optimized for surviving, first of all, against the psychopathic reality that we live in. Because, let's face it, if you can survive against psychopaths, you can deal with anything, right? So, all of these things come into play in turning people into kinds of human beings that, if something cataclysmic or catastrophic does happen on our planet, you're prepared to deal with it not just mentally and emotionally, but also physically. It's very important. So, let's see, what have I got here? Do I have another slide? I think that's it. Okay, good job for that one. Now, we're going to get on to paranormal or ultranatural. And I don't think I have one. Do I have one? Yeah, I guess I do. Oh yeah, how handy. Look at the color, like that. Chu did that. Okay. So that's me back, oh geez, when was that? 1990, that was 2000, wasn't it? That was in 2000. As we said, remember, there are only two possibilities for client end users of the system. The direct user and the indirect user. And as I proposed, possibly both. Probably it was designed for the indirect user, in other words, the created being, and it was co-opted by the others. So I've just kind of got a little bit reversed from this guy. But he's an engineer. I mean, what does he know? Come on. And communication systems are for the purpose of bridging the space between two or more receptors, intelligent beings. Kathy can experiment as a case in point. Source, man on telephone. Well, we've got me sitting there with a board. Or just me. Then we've got an encoder, the mouthpiece of the telephone. A message, the words man speaks. Well, I guess we should reverse this to make the source of Cassie Payne's writing in the future. And the encoder, which would be, what is it that you call it? The The transmitter, retransmitter.
Oh, yeah.
And then the message, and then a channel, a decoder, a receiver. So, maybe you guys can play with that and decide which of these, elements apply, because I'm sitting there using a board and I've got usually somebody else there. But part of the problem is actually decoding it. The decoder is the board. And the receiver is me, but then what I do with it after I receive it, that's really important too. And there's a picture of our board in action. As you can see, it's a little blurry because the dadgum thing moves so fast. Oh, wrong way. So now, let's talk about the origin of the universe and the origin of religion. This is our Fred Hoyle. We just love him. Famous astronomer Fred Hoyle, friend and colleague of Victor Clute, made some interesting remarks in his book, The Origin of the Universe and the Origin of Religion. Science is unique to human activities in that it possesses vast areas of certain knowledge. The collective opinion of scientists in these areas about any problem covered by them will almost always be correct. Well, that was before psychopathy took over science. Back in Fred Hoyle's day, it was still true. It is unlikely that much in these areas will be changed in the future, even in 1,000 years. Well, that applies to some of the older science, not what's going on nowadays. But for areas of uncertain knowledge, the story is very different. Indeed, the story is pretty well the exact opposite. But the collective opinion of scientists almost always incorrect. There is an easy proof of this statement because of the large number of scientists nowadays and because of the large financial support which they enjoy. Uncertain problems would mostly have been cleared up already if it were otherwise. So you can be pretty sure that wherever problems resist a solution for any length of time by an appreciable number of scientists, the ideas used for attacking them must be wrong. It is therefore a mistake to have anything to do with popular ideas for solving certain uncertain issues. And the more respectable the ideas may be, the more certain it is that they are wrong. I would say that this even applies to the New Age and Human Potential movement, because if you really examine the history of it and observe it carefully, the way it moves and morphs and changes, you'll notice that some of the most popular things that just, people write books, they get thousands of books published, my God, they have, international audiences, they travel, they do all these things, and you just gotta wonder, I had to create my own publishing company to get a book published. Literally. And I still can't get carried in major distribution catalogs because they refuse, even though I meet all the criteria for being carried in a distribution catalog. I have to sell every book on the web by hand myself by virtue of the fact that I have a website. And I get penalized by Google so that people don't find my website. And I've been on the web and had all this material there for the last, 15 years or so? So, if it's popular, it's probably wrong. More than a century ago, Alfred Russel Wallace noticed that the higher qualities of man are acausal, like the universe itself. Where human qualities have been honed by evolution and natural selection, there is very little difference between one individual and another. Given equivalent opportunities for training, healthy human males of age 20 will hardly differ in their abilities to run. But for the higher qualities, it is very much otherwise. This is important. From inquiries made of teachers of art, Wallace estimated that for every child who draws instinctively and correctly, there are hundreds that don't. The proportions are much the same in music and mathematics. And for those who are outstanding in these fields, the proportions are more like 1 in a million. Having made this point, Wallace then made the striking argument that while the abilities with small spreads like running would have been important to the survival of primitive man, the higher qualities had no survival value at all. That's what he thought. Because what if those higher qualities also come with awareness, psychic ability, a questing spirit, wanting to know what's going on, being able to read the signs, looking out the window and saying, that's not global warming, buddy, and I say just kind of. So what if those are the people who fall at the precise proper place in the distribution curve to actually survive, and Wallace was wrong. Perhaps this is not entirely true. Perhaps higher abilities had survival value in terms of those individuals who could read the handwriting on the wall in a scientifically observational way. Or more speculatively, perhaps higher abilities could ensure survival by warning an individual that catastrophe was on its way, thereby enabling them to act in preparation to survive. Foil game. Over a span of 12 years spent in the Amazon and in the forests of the East Indies, Wallace is said to have discovered 30,000 new species of bat. He lived by shipping his specimens to an agent in London, who then marketed them to museums. During most of the time when he wasn't writing epoch-making papers on biological evolution, he lived with primitive tribesmen. Wallace therefore knew a great deal about the modes of survival of primitive man, probably more than anybody else of his generation. His views on the matter therefore carry some weight, and what he said was that in his experience he never saw a situation in which an aptitude for mathematics would have been of help to primitive tribes. So little numerous were they that in 12 years he saw only a few of them who could count as high as 10. His conclusion was the higher qualities, the qualities with the greatest variability from individual to individual, had not been derived from natural selection. Abilities derived from natural selection have a spread just like a distribution curve. Abilities not derived from natural selection have very wide spreads. And then he says, I think the higher qualities must be of genetic origin the same as the rest. The mystery is that we have yet to be endowed with the relevant genes in advance of them being useful, but that's not true, because that's what Schiller has shown us to be the opposite. That they already exist in the population, just waiting for the environment to change to be manifest. The objection is that it explodes one's concepts, raising all manner of new ideas, which is exactly what respectability dislikes, because it is only in times of stagnation that the respectability flourishes. Hoyle's remarks certainly raise a lot of questions, but the one that immediately comes to mind is, are human beings with higher faculties mutations? A related question is, are psychopaths also mutations in the other direction? Probably a metaphor for Noah just being able to read the signs by looking out the window, or walking around, or detecting how people were behaving. And it was described as really a horrible period of time, where every kind of decadence and every kind of filth and perversion was going on in the world around him. And people laughed at him. They probably called him a cult, because he was paying attention. So, I think that the most important thing about the Cassiopean experiment and what we've learned from it is that, and they've talked an awful lot about DNA. I had thought about putting together an entire handout on that, but it turned out to be too long. It was, it would have cost me a fortune to have it all turned up and give it to everybody when they could afford it. So let's think about, how many of y'all are maybe carrying mutations that are just waiting to be activated. And all you got to do to get yourself ready is, take care of your diet, maybe do some work on yourself to get your emotions cleared, to get to an objective state of knowledge, because being objective I mean, going back to what Schrödinger was wondering why people eat, what was being exchanged. Well, I think that there is a lot being exchanged between us and the environment, and we need to know the exact science of what to do and how to do it optimally. And there's also a side thing here. Even if nothing ever did happen, even if the governments of the world finally decided to shake hands and get along, even if they sorted out all of our problems, made everything all happy and hunky-dory, and everybody had a house to live in and a decent job, and a decent education, and their kids were well fed, even if all that happened, you'd still be better off because you can be in good condition and be optimized for living your life to the fullest. So what did you have to lose for taking care of yourself? Not a thing. And everything to gain. Yeah? So, as you said, I think the higher qualities must be of genetic origin, the same as the rest. And he talks about being endowed with the relevant genes in advance of them being useful, and as Schiller has shown with his analysis of the system, that is indeed the case. And then talking about psychopaths, I don't know how many of you do any research on that, but I think it's probably one of the most important things we can do, because being aware and awake about psychopaths, either you know and you carry that knowledge into the future and teach your children, or they'll eat you alive. They will destroy you. If you eat the food they want you to eat, take the pills they want you to take, and live your life the way they want you to live it, you will be food for psychopaths. And these are some of the good books on the topic. And of course that's a movie. I don't know if any of you have ever watched it, but I highly recommend it. And that's that for that. Now we have, I think what we want to do now is we want to go to questions and answers. What do you think? Because I know that there are several people here who want me to talk about certain things, and I think probably the best way for me to talk about them is for them to ask me a specific question, and then I can talk about it. What do you think? Yeah?
Yeah.